Hi, this is Human Hamza, and this is another video, part of the Waves 2U video tutorial series. In this video, I'll show you how to utilize the Users and Groups section to manage CMS and portal users within the system. We'll see how we can quickly create new users and groups in various ways. When we first log in, we'll land on our initial dashboard, and we can access the Users and Groups section in two ways. We can either utilize our dashboard scroller up here and click on this icon to access that interface, or we can open up our CMS menu tree, and here on the very bottom we have something called the security section, which we can open up and also access to groups and users. The one difference here is that we'll also be able to open up this node and see all the different users and groups that are within the system at that current time. I'm going to click on this users and groups item up here on the very top of our dashboard scroller, and that's going to take me to this interface which lets me manage both users and groups. When we first come here, we'll notice that we're toggled to managing our groups, and in this case particularly we're managing CMS groups. Now before we get into specifics, let me describe what the difference is between a CMS group and a portal group, and this goes same with a CMS user and a portal user. Basically we have two user sets, but they could also be shared. When it comes to the users who enter the CMS and perform daily tasks such as creating web pages and updating content, those are our CMS users, and they could belong to CMS groups. However, Waves 2 also has the ability to power websites that have users themselves by using a combination of our login widget and being able to authenticate users to different sections of different websites. So in that case, we're talking portal users, the users who actually enter and access certain sections of the website that's built using Waves 2. Now I mentioned that in some cases these can overlap, and that's because once we create a user, that same user can be toggled between either a portal user, a CMS user, or can be checked to be both users at the same time. So now let's look at the grid here. It's one of our familiar grids which has a built-in search, a couple different tools that we can use to act upon any selected item in the grid. Now when we look at the grid here, we're looking at two different items here. First, we can authenticate a user locally, which means with the CMS, and then there's another way of bringing in and authenticating users against an Active Directory. And I'll show you later on how we can go and use the domain controller tool of the system to actually query a specific Active Directory server, get a list of all the users and groups, and select which ones we want to bring into the system. When we do that, the users are actually authenticated against that Active Directory server rather than against the CMS. But let's start with a basic user. So here we are reviewing all of our groups. I can quickly toggle over and manage my users. When I toggle over to manage users, I'm automatically selected to CMS users. You can see that we have currently two users that are within the system here. If I wanted to add a new user, I can click on add here. And right from here I can give this user's full name. For example, I'll add one of my colleagues, John Clyde, and we'll add his email from here. Next, we get to decide whether or not we want to set a specific expiration date and time for this user. For example, say that you have a consultant who's maybe coming into the CMS to just do a little SEO work for you. You can say that on, say, December 1st, this particular user is expired and will automatically be logged out of the system on that particular date and time. And we'll set this for, let's say, midnight. Here you can see that this particular user is set for the CMS, but as I said before, I can also set this user to be a portal user. Finally, we're going to set a password, so I can set a temporary password for this user. And then once we have these credentials filled out, we get to decide which group or groups this user belongs to. Now, if I set John to the admin group, I'll be sure that when John logs in, he has full access to any section of the CMS. If I set him to the guest group, it's the exact opposite. He won't have any access, and instead we'll have to go and individually provide John access rights to different sections of the CMS. Of course, we can also create custom groups and set different permissions to those, and in the case where we want to assign a user to multiple groups, we can hold down our control key and select multiple groups or deselect a group in that fashion. So here I'm going to set John to the admin group, and once I'm ready, I'll click on save, and immediately we'll see that John's added to this particular list. And right off the bat, I can log out and log in with John, and we'll see that he has his own user and can basically access anything since he's part of that admin group. Once John logs in, he also has the ability to manage his profile, and if he uploads an image, that image will appear here. Now for existing users, we can select them and use our edit option by clicking this tool on the top, the edit tool, and here we can change some existing items for this particular user. For example, I could change their password. I may want to temporarily disable this user. There are cases where if a user enters the wrong password a few times, they'll be locked out of the system. When that happens, we need to come in here and re-enable them so we can change their status from disabled to enabled. We can also edit the personal info of a user from here. So if we want to change something that a user may have uploaded to their account, we can open this particular window, and here we can see that some of the contact info, including that user's image, can be changed directly from here. If we want to delete a user from the group, I can select that user and click on this delete tool. It's going to ask me if I'm sure to delete. I'll click on OK, and that user will be removed and can no longer access the system. Now these are CMS users. If we hop over to portal users, it's basically the same exact idea. I can click on add here and you can see that's the same form. Now as far as the portal users go, there's a whole other section as far as configuring a website to have a login and deciding which pages are password protected before this actually becomes useful. But again, that's another side task that's usually involved when developing the website. And if we go over now to our managed groups where we originally were in, we know that we could also add groups directly from here. The CMS comes in with a couple of default groups. For example, that admin group that we added John to. The admin group provides access to the entire CMS. The guest group that we mentioned earlier, a couple other groups such as the power user group, which is kind of like the admin group but doesn't have certain access to things like configuration and a couple more technical options in the system. User group is just another basic group that any user assigned to that section, to that group, will not have any access. We'll have to assign those permissions and roles individually. And when you create a user that has basic rights, permissioning and roles is something that's described in another video, but that's where we really fine-tune which sections and which tasks a particular user can access and act upon when they log into the CMS. So now that's the first type of user, which we described as authenticating locally with the system. But then we're able to also bring in users from a domain controller. So now I'm going to show you how to query a particular Active Directory, bring in those users, and from there they'll authenticate against that Active Directory server. So in order to go and query that domain controller and bring in users from the Active Directory, first thing I'm going to need to do is log out as this client admin for Waves 2 and instead log in as the super administrator of this particular deployment. The super administrator is the only user on any deployment that has access to the domain controller section. So now that I'm here, I can open up and within my CMS tree, when I open up my configuration section, I'll see the Manage Domain Controllers item. And once the Manage Domain Controllers grids load, I'll see all of the different Active Directory entries that I currently have for this particular deployment. So if I want to add a new one, I'll click on this Add tool here, and the first thing we're going to do is select the client that this is for, and in this case we'll choose Waves 2. And now I just need to provide some credentials for the Active Directory server. So first I'll put the URL for that server. Next I'll put in the administrator username and the password. Finally, I want to choose the type of Active Directory, and in this case it's Windows. Once I have all this set, I'll click on Save. And you'll see that Waves 2 has been added as an entry. Now the next step here is to import users and groups, and I can click on Import here. Basically, it's going to go and communicate with the Active Directory server and return a list of all users and groups that are available there within that Active Directory. So here we are. It's going to list all of them. And now I have the option of choosing any of these particular items and bringing in the users and groups. In this case, I'm going to choose this broadcast group. And when we open it up, we'll see that we have a whole set of users within here. And I may choose to exclude a few of these users. Once I have the user selected and the group selected, next I can click on this Add button here. And basically that's going to import these users into our users and groups bin. So we can see that here's a message. It tells us the groups that have been imported and the particular users that have been imported. Now that we imported those users, we can log out here, and we're going to log back in as our Waves 2 client admin. And as soon as I log in, I'm just going to toggle back over to my users and groups bin. And here we'll see that while we're on Manage Groups, under the Authenticate Against Active Directory, we have our one group here, and those users are listed within this bin. So that's our broadcast group. And if I go over to manage users, I'll see that those users are also separated with an Active Directory authentication. So here's the 3 users that we brought in just a moment ago using the Active Directory import. So that just shows you the 2 different ways where we can create new users within the CMS, whether we create them manually or bring them in from a domain controller. And again, there's other videos which are going to explain how to assign permissions and roles and how to create workflow for these users. But this video really sums up the basics of managing users and groups within Waves 2 content management system.